Welcome back, everyone. Integrating Real Perspective Film Review Corner here. And so now, finally, the Monsterverse series marathon marches forward with the Gareth Edwards 2014 movie. Before I begin, I wanted to go into a little back history behind my viewing experience with these movies. Now, it's a common misconception that Godzilla movies are only about the monster fights, and the human characters are just these listless ciphers who are there to fill in by the numbers roles. I mean, there was the rare exception with Miki Sagusa, who starred in six of the Heisei era movies, played by Megumi Udaka, and the cast of the G-Force, whom Mickey was a part of, was always present throughout those movies. And obviously, there's Steve Martin, played by the late Raymond Burr. Of course, it would be heresy for me not to mention him and to mention Dr. Serizawa from the 1954 movie. And of course, Raymond Burr played in both the 1954 and Godzilla 1984 or 1985 if you saw the US release version. Now, I always felt that Katsura and her father, Dr. Mifune, from Terror of Mechagodzilla, were significantly important characters that I personally had sentimental feelings for. And yet, with all these characters that I listed, most of them suffered from the horrible butchering of the characters' dialogue through the curse of cheesy English dubbing. And because of Toho's stubbornness to make the original Japanese cuts available for US audiences, it took until 2019 for Criterion to finally release all 15 Showa era Godzilla films, which would be available with the original Japanese language and English subtitles to be released. That hasn't happened yet with the Heisei era, though you can find movies on Actvid where you can watch, like the 1991 Godzilla versus King Ghidorah or 1992's Godzilla and Mothra: The Battle for Earth, just to name a few examples, which you can watch in the original Japanese dialect. But you're also going to have pop-up ads to deal with too. So the the Toho Godzilla films have always fell under this curse of having the fan hunt down the ideal presentation for those movies in which the characters can be treated with the utmost respect that they deserve, since they are serving a storyline that actually communicates a very profound message. Meanwhile, over here in America, the Monsterverse movies changed the game up significantly by creating stories starring human characters that you could actually care for and relate to right when you enter into the movie experience itself. At least for American audiences, since yes, this is still a product of Hollywood, but I truly and sincerely mean this when I say that Aaron Taylor Johnson, Elizabeth Olsen, Ken Watanabe, Sally Hawkins, and Bryan Cranston, um, that right there is a better and more interesting ensemble of actors than having Ferris Bueller and a voice cast member of The Simpsons in that abysmally terrible 1998 ego jerk masturbation fest by Roland Hemorrhoid. Unforgivable. Well, fortunately, though, Gareth Edwards And his 2014 rendering of Godzilla managed to help heal the scars of my traumatized childhood. And I gotta say, 10 years on, since I saw that movie in theaters, the first Godzilla movie of the Monsterverse series has always been an intriguing one to revisit, simply because Godzilla is presented in such a mysterious and subtle way. He doesn't just appear and then take the main star of the show here. He's not the main star of the show for the first 59 minutes of the film. The movie takes its time to establish the mythology of him as a god who has lived on Earth for many millennia, especially when the Earth was more radioactive. Hence why there are different filming techniques used here, like close-ups of different parts of his body movements rather than revealing his full stature, obscuring him in shadow and smoke. All of this to set up the experience of the human character's sense of awe and wonder upon witnessing the monster from their angle. It's really like being part of a virtual reality game experience, looking at how the Brodies, played by Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen, are seeing the action unfold around them. Now, seeing as how I recently also watched the latest Toho Godzilla movie, minus one, I can't help but notice stark similarities between the two in terms of atmosphere. Both movies have an A24 art house look to them, like the scene in the legendary Warner Brothers movie where Ford Brody and his men parachute from the plane to begin their stealth mission, their descent. And as they start, the sun is setting in the background. Or is the sun rising? You don't really know. But then they descend below the clouds, which are dark and menacing. And then once they penetrate through the stratosphere of the clouds, they see a city engulfed in flames. And then Ford and his men catch glimpses of Godzilla battling the Mutos, which in the entire 2 hour run of this movie, that doesn't happen till the last half hour of the film. And the first time you see Godzilla is just very, very briefly at the 59-minute mark. And before that, it's mostly just the Mutos that are just terrorizing um, this seashore city in Hawaii. Um, and this movie really is an amazing spectacle. It really portrays Godzilla as a hero as opposed to minus one, where Toho is still portraying him as a villain, as noted by a similarly moving scene where Godzilla is slowly following the fishing boat as the men are releasing mines to try and kill him. Visually, that scene is a spectacle too, except that it's more ominous and threatening, whereas Godzilla 2014 is more beautiful, dark, and mysterious to watch. Now, I am not saying that one is better than the other. I'm just saying that I enjoy the different and unique cultural interpretations of Godzilla. So, to kick off this discussion on the film, after some really intriguing and visually striking credits featuring case file type font for the names of the actors and the crew, along with a montage of video footage related to Monarch. Monarch being the agency that is the equivalent to Area 51, except they explore terrestrial monsters instead of aliens. The film begins at a mining site in the Philippines in 1999. We are introduced to a scientist who is also named Dr. Sarazawa. except there are two interesting differences. The first name is different, and he has zero relation to the Serizawa from the 1954 film. And while the 1954 Serizawa's first name was Daisuke, the first one, this one, Ken Watanabe's Serizawa's first name is Ishiro Serizawa. He is accompanied by Vivian Graham, and they both are looking into this skeleton that has the same shape as Godzilla. And it appears to be absorbing radiation from some nearby source, powering itself up. Later in Japan, we are introduced to Joe Brody, played by Bryan Cranston, and his wife Sandra, played by Juliette Binoche. They both are studying seismic activity that is possibly linked to that same alien skeleton artifact in the Philippines. I still remember when this movie came out, some random friend on my Facebook page focused on him exclusively as the reason for going to see Godzilla. Bryan Cranston, that is. He was obviously a Breaking Bad fan, since I know this movie had Bryan Cranston acting in a movie for the first time since Breaking Bad, and that show had just finished up just before Godzilla went into production, I think. I really haven't seen anything of Bryan Cranston except that I do remember him for playing this really entertaining cameo in Little Miss Sunshine. And I like that cameo that he did, where he's talking with Greg Kinnear, who is, you know, got some. Well, I'm not going to go too much off on a tangent. That's definitely a good movie to check out if you're a Bryan Cranston fan. He doesn't have a big role in there, but it's a very important role in that film. Anyhow, Sandra, Juliette Binoche's character, ends up not having much to do on screen here other than talking about Joe's birthday. Juliette would obviously have a much more star-studded role in the 2017 CGI live action remake of Ghost in the Shell. But she also has a career that goes back to the 90s and possibly even further back than that. She was in that Three Colors trilogy from director Krzysztof uh, Kieslowski, a French trilogy, no doubt, that I've heard a lot about but never actually watched. She is a really phenomenal actress, though, a phenomenal French actress. Maybe not on the same level as Audrey Tautou, Charlotte Gainsbourg, Marion Coitland, or Emmanuel Burt, but she still occupies her own special niche in French cinema. Anyhow, so Sandra dies early on in the film when a violent infusion of nuclear energy comes storming through the tunnels. Joe has to close the airlock door on her and seal her inside so as to prevent the radiation from getting out and causing a nuclear meltdown. And consequently, a leakage that would travel several miles long and killing people in the nearby residential areas. This ends up traumatizing Joe for 15 years. And, when we finally arrive at the present year, 2014, his son Ford has grown up and now has a wife and son of his own. Aaron Taylor Johnson is always such a wily actor who plays the most badass roles, whether it's playing a hick in Nocturnal Animals, a military commander in Tenet, or an action star, yeah, an actual action star in The Fall Guy, which I had actually just seen earlier this in the summer. He's always such a showstopper. Now, here, when he plays a former Navy lieutenant, he's perfectly well suited to play the family man. Later, though, when he comes into contact with the Muto for the first time, and then later learns about Godzilla, he's put into a space that is unfamiliar to him. He seems confused and has difficulty at first grasping what his dad taught him about echolocation so that he can apply his knowledge to helping Godzilla become an ally force to stopping the Mutos. Muto being short for massive unidentified terrestrial organism. So Ford's idyllic life is interrupted, though, when his dad reemerges again in Japan. He's in jail at this point, and he's called upon to bail him out. Ford's called upon to bail his dad out. Soon after, he's pulled back into the past as Joe returns to the site of the Janjira nuclear power plant where an obvious cover up has been underway for some time. And still no Godzilla at this point. The focus instead is on these Mutos, or at least this one particular Muto, which is where both Joe and Ford would meet Serizawa and Graham and learn the truth about what caused the Janjira power plant destruction. The Muto emits an EMP, which is an electromagnetic pulse that essentially contains roughly the same amount of radiation as Godzilla. And once this Muto breaks out of its shell, it kills Joe in the process. Yeah, so you remember that Facebook friend that I mentioned earlier? He was pissed off because of Cranston dying so early on. I think it's like only half an hour into the film. Even the actor himself was ashamed of his decision to kill off Joe's character so soon. I myself was actually rather heartbroken because he delivers such a powerful, dramatic performance when he's being held in the interrogation room and he's talking all about, you know, how, you know, we need to find a way to stop this, at this point, this unnameable force, this unnameable, this creature from breaking out, because it would mean taking us back to the Stone Age. And of course, when Serizawa commands his engineers and technicians to shut off the I think it's like the nuclear energy that is keeping this thing powered up, the thing then breaks out of its shell and then kills Joe. So it's like the poor man was trying to warn all these people and about what was going to happen, and it seemed like he just died in vain. And of course, really breaks this really breaks Ford's heart. But eventually, um, the full picture would be revealed to him as he's being brought home on a military ship, that this is when he's briefed by the two Monarch members regarding the origin of Godzilla, which is where the infamous scene arrives where Serizawa says that we called him Godzilla. Now you know why I'm still excited watching this movie, even 10 years on. Ken Watanabe is really the whole reason why you should love the 2014 Godzilla movie. And if you still prefer the Japanese Godzilla movies, if you're just like so scarred by the 1998 crapathon that was you know what I'm talking about. This this movie really erases that mistake because Ken Watanabe offers just such a poetic and very articulate performance to Serizawa, which I mean, he's had his essay. I'm sorry, his resume includes a couple of Christopher Nolan movies that he's been in with, Batman Begins and with um, Inception. So it's like I already know what a towering presence this actor is, and I just freaking love him as Serizawa. The honor and respect that he gives to the original Toho legend by elevating him to mythical status. The wonder of watching a force of nature which claims ownership over the planet, along with other monsters, giants under the sun that ruled the earth long before humans, which is where cryptozoology eventually gets talked about then 5 years later in King of the Monsters to further flesh out Monarch's pursuit for new animal species. Since I'm talking about cast members here, I should really go off on a tangent to talk about TJ Storm. He's the man who does all the CGI movements for Godzilla. He's very important to this film because he also played the title character in 2018's The Predator, and his husky yet swift movements are actually quite similar to the Predator. I just thought that was a cool fact to point out since I'm a fan of the Predator franchise as well. And TJ Storm would later portray Godzilla yet again in the 2019 King of the Monsters movie. So then what follows is a heated argument between the pacifist Serizawa and a hard-headed admiral played by David Strathern, who I remember from the movie Cold Souls, Dr. Flintstein, the guy who extracts Paul Giamatti's soul and it comes out looking like a chickpea. Excellent meta movie, especially if you want to see a movie with Paul Giamatti playing himself. It's got a very, very Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind vibe. But anyways, Strathern plays Admiral William Stentz, who wants to kill the escaped Mutos and any new ones that come up. Just the typical protocol for a military admiral that just wants to, protect the public. But meanwhile, Serizawa believes that Godzilla is the answer to bringing balance back to nature. Hence his other famous line in the film, let them fight. Let them fight. Now, when Godzilla's first sightings begin, it's mainly aerial views of his dorsal spine fins sticking out of the surface of the water. Then, when the Muto arrives in Honolulu and terrorizes a bunch of people who are just enjoying a nighttime party on the beach, Godzilla officially makes his first appearance. Now, this is what ends up being a point of irritation for the more closed-minded viewers who just won't shut up with their stupid, asinine complaints about not having their appetite satisfied the right way, or right away. Okay, so there's no actual fight when Godzilla shows up. Why the hell do some Godzilla fans, most Godzilla fans, want the same old instant gratification when they've already had 6 fucking decades of that already? Yeah? Because this movie came out on the 60th anniversary since the 1954 movie. Yeah? The fact that Gareth denied showing a kaiju fight, even when we're in an hour into the film, was very clever. A clear new breakaway from tradition so as to leave you in wonder as to what happens next. In the next scene, Ford's son and his wife Ellie are witnessing the attack on television, which once again proves how important and essential it was to put the human characters at the center of attention first. The fact that you did not get a monster fight right away was important. Seriously, the complainers towards Gareth's decision are just stupid. Just stupid. Because meanwhile, witnessing Ford's journey to get back home to his family is incredible to watch. You get to see him in action working on getting weapons and artillery together with other army men to kill off the mutos. Watching this guy's demeanor change over time was always a rather emotionally involving ride, especially since he had lost both of his parents now. He's really using the resources that he can find to help save humanity. When he returns to the States, he works with a bunch of soldiers who are otherwise working to tend to the casualties and survivors of the Muto's destruction. It's like you're watching someone go from being clueless about everything that's happening to somebody who becomes motivated by duty to help out. He truly becomes a different person by the end of the movie. For those people who love Godzilla minus one, I can't understand why there is such a divide between the Japanese and the American Godzilla films. Like, you know, Koichi Shikajima's kamikaze pilot in minus one has the same emotional weight to it as Ford Brody's character. I don't know. Maybe it's just the fact that Japanese Godzilla fans are a bunch of uptight purists that just will never open their mind up to the fact that America can in fact make a great Godzilla movie with just the same amount of emotional resonance that a Japanese Godzilla movie can make. But whatever. There's some animated like images that pop up, like the scene with the burning high-speed train that Ford narrowly escapes while the Muto destroys the bridge. That looks like a Miyazaki film. That was another thing about this movie, about this Godzilla movie that impressed me was the visual aspect of it. Around the 90-minute mark when Godzilla returns for the epic showdown with the Mutos, the images there are very powerfully evocative, very, very well tuned to the beats of the story. Like you're watching a Robert Rodriguez graphic novel film in motion. Like if Sin City, the aesthetic of Sin City was used for this kaiju movie. Yeah. And watching Brody, coming down from, on his parachute with his men, witnessing it all and all that's going on in action. It's just some very, very incredible melodramatic stuff to watch. Especially like when Brody gets to the nesting spot where the Muto lays its eggs and he's seeing like shadows and smoke of Godzilla's silhouette around building corners. And then at one scene, like Godzilla collapses to the ground and both him and Ford make eye contact with each other. In fact, and then there's the very, very end when um the war has been won and the next morning Godzilla is seen laying down in exhaustion in a big pile of rubble, making it clear that even Godzilla is as human as us, that he has been a warrior that has been keeping the balance of nature intact for centuries. but he too gets really, really tired, just like people do. Well, and the fact that um when when the news cameras capture him and use the headline King of the Monsters, it's pretty obvious that Godzilla at this point has now been exalted as a savior for humanity. Yeah. And everybody just watches him and marvel, especially Serizawa, um, as he's going back out to sea. Serizawa and Vivian see him going back out to sea. It's just, an incredible and beautiful and very, very theatrical sight. I would personally love to see this movie come back to the big screen again. I would definitely enjoy the thrill of seeing it, on a much more towering scale for me. And so, anyways, that's it for Godzilla 2014. Quite a spectacle this movie is. Quite. And it gets the Monsterverse series off with a powerhouse start. Just wow. Yeah, brilliantly made film. And from there, things would, start to get more increasingly interesting as the series would continue to evolve. So, um, with that being said, I'm not going to spoil it too much. I'm just going to wait until the next review because obviously the next film I'm going to be reviewing is Kong Skull Island, which would come out 3 years after Godzilla 2014. So, so I'm gonna leave this review off on a high note, and I hope you enjoyed it as usual. Thank you, fellow reelers. And once again, my wonderful and ever grateful thanks to Mega Media Exchange. Once again, check these guys out. They're the best. Love you all. Love, the quality of your DVDs and Blu-rays and CDs for almost 20 years now. Apologies, camera cut out again. So yeah, anyways, I will see you on the flip side of the reel, fellas. And in the meantime, go Godzilla and kaiju movies forever. Oh yeah, also do check my link out at the bottom as usual, because I am working on creating a fundraiser to raise money from my content to visit Arizona to check out this Tantra school called ISTA. I want to, you know, further my education in the mysteries of Tantra. I mean, if you want to learn more about that stuff, that's why I'm leaving the links below. There's a YouTube video and then a link to the school itself. So, anyways, appreciate your support. See you on the flip side of the reel, which of course is going to be Kong Skull Island. Ciao.